So we just got completed with a great session talking about how the tools and features that Microsoft Office 365 brings to you from a productivity perspective create all sorts of opportunities for transformation and overall improvement within your organization of collaboration and sharing. Of course, with those opportunities comes some risks, whether it be with external access or how we're going to share or how we're going to authenticate or who we're going to allow to authenticate, or maybe it's the devices themselves, BYOD or mobility or mobile phones. These all present risks to us, but they're manageable risks. In our next session, we're going to discuss how you can provide a secure and governed Office 365 environment to bring these tools to your end users and mitigate that risk. Our presenter today is going to be Jeff Fowler. Jeff is our Senior Federal Cloud Strategist on the Planet Technologies Federal team. Before that, Jeff had a CTO role with a very large and important federal systems integrator firm, focusing on some of our Department of Energy and other customers. On our panel today, we welcome back Travis Moore. Travis is the Senior Cloud Architect for Planet Technologies. Bob Ballard, our Principal Cloud Strategist. And then we also have with us today Tom Oakes. Tom is a technical sales professional with a focus on threat analytics. So we're really excited to see what the panel has to say. Jeff, interested to see your presentation.
Very good. Thank you, Steve. All right, so today we're talking about how to protect your users no matter where they are on any device, from any location, at any time. And really, collaboration is key here. So as we look at what today's modern workspace looks like, it's no longer the traditional single office location where you have everyone's in one location working with each other, and that just doesn't exist anymore. More and more time, people are collaborating with each other with a 50% increase, really, in collaboration. No more single users, single people, single contributors working with themselves. And as you look at the workforce in general, 30% these days has actually gone mobile. Like I said, people aren't in the offices anymore. They're all over the place. They've got to travel. They've got to collaborate with people across the country, around the world. And from a threat perspective, it's only getting worse. When you look at the federal government, according to just a recent study from last year, there were 77,000 cyber attacks against the 24 federal agencies in 2015, which is certainly a concerning number. Now, when you look at what you can do from a collaboration perspective, from bringing everything together for your user base, there's three main pillars that are augmented by Azure in terms of Windows 10 on the desktop side. You've got Microsoft's Enterprise Mobility plus Security for helping managing your users and your devices and how you secure those and move both on-prem as well as in motion. And then also you have Office 365, which really helps bring all these things together from a collaboration and tools perspective. Now, when you look at your enterprise in general, what you really want to do is empower your users to do what they need to do to accomplish the mission of the organization. You want to make sure you're doing this in a safe manner so that you're not losing information or having your users do things they shouldn't be doing, as well as at the same time simplifying your IT management with a single solution that allows you to have a purpose-built solution across your organization. Which is a critical thing these days when you've got so many great point products, but those don't have an integrated way of approaching how they do things. So moving on to the tools themselves. When you look at Office 365 and Windows 10, it's really improved how people can work together from no matter where they are. Traditionally, if you have one person working in their office, you have everyone around them and it works great. The problem is that with everyone scattered around, you have people across different federal agencies need to collaborate together. You have people in your office need to collaborate. If you can simply work with email, and then you have SharePoint, and you have Teams, and you have Skype for Business, where you can have a simple conversation across an instant message, deciding to do something a little bit more than that. So you fire up a video conference, and you can collaborate with people across the country. On top of that, you can even have a whiteboard session and share a presentation, discuss how we're going to do things. Now, when you look at collaboration with files, for example, let's say you want to have a document you're sharing with your team, and you want to email this to each other. Well, this creates version control issues. Now, if you want to create, consume, collaborate, and edit information, it's no longer a share and then everyone shares across to each other. You want to be able to do this in a way that you have version control in place. That's where SharePoint comes into play. and really bringing everything together in one location so that you can securely manage all of your information no matter where people work from. And on the Windows side, of course, you have the local products. You have Word and Excel and PowerPoint they've used for years. Now, having the ability to work not even on your local machine, but also on mobile devices, such as on your whatever phone you come with, or a tablet, for example. All of these things really come together and come to play for you. Now, with regards to mobility, as mentioned, people are everywhere these days. It's no longer constrained to just a single location with a single device. Users can bring whatever device they like, the ones they like the most, whether it's across Android or Windows tablets or laptops or across Apple or across iOS. Any of these things are viable these days across the mobile tools coming from Microsoft in terms of the clients or in the cloud. Now, when you work on your information that you have, you want to make sure you have access to all of your information all the time. So this is where cloud storage comes into play across your OneDrive or SharePoint, where no matter where you are, you can be productive. You can work on your office machine, sync your information, stand up, walk out the door. Suddenly you have on your phone, you have access for your OneDrive to all your files. You have access on your tablet to all of your files. Across a kiosk, you have access to your files in a secure manner. Let's say you've gone offline. You can actually sync your information, your files to your local device. So you continue editing and working, and then once you're back on Wi-Fi or data or in the office, you can sync your information. It's all up to date no matter where you are. And really, being able to work from anyone, work with all of your collaborators from any location is really a powerful thing that you can do these days. Now, all of this doesn't happen unless you can do it securely. That's a big concern these days with regards to in the federal government or the enterprise or any organization. Security is paramount. You can't just walk out there and just hand off files to matter where people are from any location. You've got to make sure that you have controls in place where if you send a file to someone, for example, if they forward on to somebody else, you want to make sure that that other person can't access that file. So you actually have controls that stay with that information no matter where it goes, that file across a spreadsheet or a Word document or a PowerPoint presentation, where the document can actually have a time limit where it actually will detonate after a period of time to make sure that people can access it. And if someone has the ability to open it, let's say you can lock down where they can't actually do a screenshot, they can't copy information from that document, they can't do anything else that you don't want them to do. You can control from a location. And really, you want to make sure you can do this in a simplified way, where you have a single portal, really a single pane of glass to manage all of your devices across tablets and mobile phones and your workstations using Intune, or using EMS, for example, where you have the ability to have advanced threat protection, where if you receive a file or a link from someone outside of your organization or even within your organization, you can be protected from safe links with regards to knowing that if you click on a link, Microsoft will automatically scan that link to make sure it's not embedded with going to a bad location with malware or viruses or ransomware even. Or even files where with ATP, with advanced threat protection, it'll actually detonate that file in a secure chamber and make sure that there's no malware that reaches out and pulls things from locations that you haven't authorized. And really, this is all about safeguarding your organization's data across PCs, phones, and tablets, protecting against security threats, having a simplified single pane of glass management across all of your tools and technologies, and making sure at the same time that you have the latest updates across your managed devices, whether they're from a corporate perspective or from a mobile device perspective that belongs to somebody else. Now, with regards to doing all of this, it's great that you have lots of tools at hand. You have lots of options available to you today, but how do you consume this? How do you go about approaching this? Just like Bob mentioned earlier today, this is about governance, this is about having a plan. You don't have to consume all of these tools at once. You can take let's say for instance, you finish dinner, you sit down with a pie. You could eat the entire pie at once, but no one really wants to do it. That's not good for you. You can have a single slice and focus on that, deploying ATP, deploying Azure Information Protection, and deploying some of the other key functions and tools so that you make sure you do it right the first time or over time. And then once you have that down, as Bob mentioned earlier, you move on to other tools and technologies to make sure that what's right for your organization is in place and ready to go. And having your admins have the control and ability to manage all of these things through single portals, through simplified tools, so that it's not overly complex. Your administrators aren't overly burdened with managing the security of your devices. At the same time, all of these things are happening before you in the background, where Microsoft's actually handling a lot of the underlying problems that you've had in the past where you've got the full stack from the data center up to the devices where they've got that all managed for you. So when you look at controls, for instance, like 853 in the federal world, Microsoft has offloaded the responsibility of handling that for you so that you can focus on delivering the mission of your organization and making sure people have the tools that they need to do what you need to do, but in a way that is transparent and not blocking them. Because people always say, well, security, that slows me down. That doesn't have to be the case. So really, when you look at all of these tools and technologies, the key takeaways from this presentation is Microsoft, in Planet helping you to achieve these things, wants to make sure that you can achieve more together across your teams, with your collaborators, across your agency as well as other agencies as well as do this from anywhere you have options these days. It's no longer tied to your office. You can go work a different site or a plant or a lab or any other location across the federal government, or even from home these days in a secure manner. And then also make sure, from a security perspective, it's always on. It's always there protecting you. You set your policies. You have the tools and things in place that you want to have, and you understand what's going to happen, where it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. You protect it all the way through the entire stack. At the same time, this is simplified for you. It's no longer highly complex. It's no longer managing lots of point solutions. It's all an integrated solution for you today and really helps you achieve more in a secure manner. So thank you very much for your time.
Jeff, great presentation, really informative. So welcome to the panel. I want to reintroduce everybody. Jeff Fowler, great presentation, appreciate that. Travis, welcome back, joining us again. Bob, our principal cloud strategist. And then, of course, Tom Oakes. Tom, again, just to remind everybody, and really critical to this presentation, you're a technical sales professional, but you're focused on this threat intelligence world, right?
Correct.
So Tom, let me start with you. We have so many customers out there that have purchased Office 365, and along with that purchase, they might have bought the bundle with EMS or SPE or now M365, but really they thought they were buying email or SharePoint Online or something like that, and now they're recognizing these security threats, maybe their CISOs recognizing these security threats. Where are you seeing them start with EMS and SPE, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think when we first position the O365, it's typically email, SharePoint, things of those natures. But what they start to realize is that they now have mobile. They can take that data anywhere, and they can access that data. Great for collaboration, sometimes scary for CISOs, though.
So, I mean, we're seeing that a lot, too, even in things around like MFA and multi-factor authentication. And, I had a conversation the other day with a customer. They were like, well, we want to access OneDrive. And, we were talking about the difference between MFA with Office 365 and MFA for other applications. Anybody want to take on that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, these days, identity is the perimeter from a security perspective. Security is paramount. But with the traditional boundaries of firewalls and things like that, really, your information is following where the people are. So if you can secure your identities across any device, with the integration of your in-home, HSPD12, for example, you've got your PIV badge, and you can authenticate your machine with that. And then from there, you have that direct integration to Active Directory and as well as Azure Active Directory, so that no matter where you go, your identity is with you and across all your devices, and you always have the information in terms of protecting your users as well as the information of your organization itself. So protection really is the key. And if you have a handle on how to protect those identities, that really makes a huge difference for an organization.
And I want to actually address that kind of in a twofold question. So, one of the things that Bob, I've been lucky to see a bunch of Bob's presentations, and one of the things he likes to say is access anywhere, anytime is the killer app of Office 365. It's not email, it's not OneDrive, it's the ability to get that information everywhere. So Bob, you want to address that, and then maybe as a second to that, Tom, address how BYOD, you just said that 3 times, BYOD is affected by this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's piggybacks on what Jeff was saying as well. The analogy that I always like to use is, we used to think about security like castles, right? Castles were the best security a city could buy, right? Like you build walls and everybody gets inside the walls, and they kept all the bad guys out until, catapults were invented and ladders, right? And then they realized siege ladders, right? And then suddenly it didn't matter, right? And in this world of mobile access, which is like you mentioned, I think this is what really is the revolutionary end user change here because they've had some of these technologies, and believe me, I'm the first one to say how incredible they all fit together and how mature they've all gotten around collaboration and other panels we were talking today. But at the end of the day, right, they're doing some things like this for years and years and years. For most of our government customers, so this is the first time ever they can do it from somewhere besides their desk. Effectively, right? Like there were always ways to get at it, but it wasn't always effective, right? So, so now we have to extend the security perimeter to these users, and I can't keep building the wall bigger and bigger, so because otherwise, at a certain point, everybody's inside the wall, right? So, going back to Jeff's point, we have to secure the device and the identity, and then theoretically, I just have my own little wall around each individual person as they're running around wherever they are, and providing a little more extra security, right? So, I think that's really the big dynamic change. And then the challenge that maps with that, because I can tell you right now, none of your end user, once they realize this change, it's not going back. They are not giving this back up. Right?
Well, and that raises the question of managed device versus unmanaged device, and that's why, Tom, maybe you can talk a little bit about the BYOD scenario.
Sure. The BYOD is definitely challenging. But to Jeff's point, what we're doing is we're securing the identity, and we're using defense in depth. So we have the ability to secure the identity, and we have the ability to enforce policy on the devices and enforce policy on applications as well.
So how does that play into conditional access, secure conditional access, that type of stuff?
So conditional access is essentially a decision tree. So I can decide based on identity, based on device, based on locations, based on those certain conditions, I can either allow or disallow people to reach that data.
Yeah, I would say a perfect example of just, because I think a lot of people hear this and they just kind of nod their head or whatever, but what we're saying is, I will let you, Steve Winter, log in from your house, but if you're overseas, I might not let you, unless maybe that's your role, right? I can let you, if you can meet this additional security requirement of giving something that you have and something that you know, right? But if you can't meet both of those standards, even though it's a device that you've had, I can determine not to allow you to join. Or I will allow you to run this application on this managed device, but not on this unmanaged device. So all of these things go in there so that I can say, it's not just, hey, we let Steve access things from home, and now wherever he is in the world, anytime, any place, no matter what he knows, what device he has, he can do it. That's not what we're doing, right? We're saying we can create conditions that are different depending on circumstances that either allow or disallow you.
So I want to kind of, and I think we sort of understand that, but how does that become real to our customers, right? Because I think one of the challenges that I know I have when I talk to customers is, we're in the government space, we're talking everywhere from large federal agencies, right, that might have large international presence, or DoD scenarios, right, all the way down to a municipality that might, be the government for a small township. And all of those customers are our government customers. So how they hear this, what we're talking about, they hear it in different ways. So Travis, I'm curious as to see how your customers, and again, getting back to the adoption scenario, where are you seeing your customers start?
So, that goes back to the kind of the core fundamental of what everyone's been saying here. It's all tied to your identity. So the good thing about Intune and the conditional access is regardless of what device you're connecting into Azure Active Directory, Office 365, whatever feature it is you're trying to access is all tied back to that single identity. So if you try to access OneDrive from your iPad, it's using that federated identity or that synchronized identity. You're trying to do it from your Android device, same thing. So what'll happen is you can create these different types of policies based off of the device type, but regardless, that onboarding process is still the same. It's all tied to that unique identity. So what that allows us to do is go through, sit down with the customer, understand, one, their organization, two, what's their security requirements? Are they letting a subset of users access to, Office 365 externally? Can you only do it from a trusted IP range, inside the corporate network? Once we understand what their access policies are, then we can build, the conditional access and the device configuration policies based off of that.
So can you guys talk to me a little bit about the scalability of that? Because one of the things I'm always afraid of in these contexts is that our largest customers will see this and go, that just can't scale. And our smaller customers will look at it and say, this sounds like complicated stuff to me. How do we bridge that gap, right? Because I think you laugh, so I think we all sort of agree those are real problems in the market space. Yet, of course it scales because we have incredibly large agencies and customers that are using it, right? And of course it is manageable because we have, smaller customers that are adopting it. So how do we help customers work through that?
Yeah, I mean, for example, traditionally on-prem, you've got your data center, you're protecting the data center, and you need to scale up because you've added more users or something has changed, you've got a new initiative. And you've got to go through the step function of adding brand new storage or brand new servers or things like that. When you've got this in the cloud, it doesn't matter how many users you have because it scales automatically for you. It doesn't make a difference if you have 10 users or if you have 100,000 users. It doesn't make a difference whatsoever. So really, the adoption of this is drastically simplified because you no longer have that capital outlay of cost. You move into more of an OpEx kind of model where you buy things by the SIP. You enable things on a per user basis, on a per feature basis. So it drastically reduces the overhead, the complexity, and really the adoption of these services.
And I would add too, one of the other things that when we talk about scale is not just like the scale of the actual service, but how do I, how many of these rules and policies and procedures in a large organization are going to have, and how long does it take it to get my little organization to be able to be where it needs to be? And I always try to tell customers to start on, let's outline what we need to have done, right? We always have to meet the bare minimum. But A, what are you doing today? How complex is that today, right? Can we accomplish it in how many few steps and how many few features or functions to turn on, right? So I think that's one, so as not being a CISO, but being an architect, my approach to security is always, the more complicated it gets to implement, the more likely I am to screw it up, right? Let's be honest. And so let's say, okay, what are the rules today? Do you have people accessing, with external devices today? What are those rules? Okay, how comfortable are we with those? How many few levers can we throw to duplicate something similar and maybe add the couple things you wish you had, right? So we start simple. And if you do that, it doesn't matter whether your list of things you need is this big or this big. Just start with the list that you're at today. You're already doing this stuff today, right? In many cases, right? And if you're not at all, then obviously you have to reconsider these things. But I think most government entities are either doing it with nowhere near the right number of controls in place today, and therefore are having heart palpitations at night trying to think about this, or they're doing it today and meeting some sort of guidelines, and we just sort of start that as a baseline and go from there. And it's not as complicated as it seems.
And to supplement that even further, kind of the approach that we take at Planet, within the Western Division is when we're onboarding an organization, normally we'll take and create 3 baseline policies. We'll do the initial compliance policy, which allows that conditional access piece to come into play. And then we'll start out with a corporate-owned device, a corporate managed device, and then a bring your own device type policy. And then from there, that allows that customer to at least have that baseline policy in place, and then they can build off of that. And then during the onboarding process, that's something that's, the approach we take there is really kind of an incremental one that goes along with, say, mailbox migrations, where we move folks in chunks, or what we call iterations. So, we'll move HR on day 1 and finance on day 2, and then the IT folks on day 3, those types of things. So as they onboard, those security measures are put into place automatically with those devices as they move from on-prem into the cloud.
So, Tom, Microsoft has these unbelievable products. We have to admit it's a little bit of alphabet soup, right? Sure. It's acronyms. How are we helping customers kind of work through the acronym soup to understand what they actually own or could own, and what is the education process here that you're bringing your customers through?
So when we talk about the Enterprise Mobility Suite, it's essentially 4 things. It's Azure Active Directory, it's Rights Management Services, it's Intune, and it's the ATA, again, acronym soup, the Advanced Threat Analyzer. So once we break that down, what we try to do is go back to identity, start from a baseline, and we try to help them understand their personas. And then we take those personas and then we add rules to them. And that way, that works with conditional access. That works with things like who has abilities to touch certain pieces of data, because there's actors 0, there's actors 1, there's actors 2, and they should safeguard their data appropriately. So when we start talking about the EMS suite, we like to break it down into those 4 pillars and try to figure out how we work back to identity.
What about ATP? Jeff, you mentioned it in your presentation. You know, ATP, it sounds great. It used to be a four-wheeled motocross bike or something, I think, right? But tell us a little bit about ATP, a little bit more about it, and then, you know, Travis, I'd love to hear how you guys are implementing and helping customers with it.
Sure. So ATP, Advanced Threat Protection, is essentially taking all the data that Microsoft sees from around the world, across all the devices, across all the applications, bringing it all into a central location, applying machine learning and advanced analytics into the intelligent security graph, and really using that information to help protect everyone across the board in terms of Microsoft customers. So, for example, I saw an example where someone received an email. It had malware in it. As it came in, the person clicked on the link. Microsoft automatically went through the process of detonating in a detonation chamber, finding out what it actually did and that it caused a problem, and then immediately sent that telemetry data back up to the centralized graph and said, hey, this is a problem for all of our users. Let's share this information around the world. Within 22 seconds, when the next person clicked on that link, it was blocked.
Wow.
So that is the kind of power that Microsoft can bring to the table these days with regards to security. I mean, Microsoft is investing $1 billion into security every single year right now. They're the biggest security company no one's ever heard of. And it's really, all of these things happen behind the scenes automatically for you, where you don't require manual intervention. You can get the dashboards to see what's happening across your enterprise. And if you have the ability to protect the links that people have, so you can protect, clicking on a bad malware, ransomware infected link, or an attachment, it really, it's all about protecting your users.
Travis, do you have a scenario where we're helping customers with this ATP?
I do, and I want to kind of zoom scope out just a little bit. So one of the nice things that I like about Office 365 and the EMS suite, Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite, is the ability to either turn features on globally or incrementally. So the scenario I used earlier about onboarding folks, one of the things we did with the state of California agency to implement ATP was they didn't want to turn it on for everyone because they were like, oh, ATP, what is this? What is it going to do? So what we did is we went in, we defined the policy, very similar like we did with Intune, and just create a baseline one that says, okay, if this happens, then this is the reaction that we're going to take. And we were able to apply that to a subset of users so they could kind of go in and see what happens, and then test, kind of kick the tires, if you will. Once they were comfortable with that, we were able to expand it out iteratively, just like the mailbox migrations, and focus it on larger groups. And as the rules were defined a little bit better, we were able to ultimately turn it on globally for the entire organization.
See, one of the things I love about the thought process in both your examples, Travis, is that, we're basically making an assumption here to a customer that says, no, I just want to roll mailboxes out, that really is a bad strategy, right? Or not bad, but potentially flawed strategy, right? That they're missing the boat of all these opportunities to do all this stuff, this important security stuff at the same time and only mess with it one time, right? So Bob, what are we telling customers who, quite frankly, just say, I'm good with email, I haven't bought Intune, I'm not interested in EMS, my security's fine?
Well, so, it's a little bit of a, you're not required to have EMS to secure your environment, right? So there are a lot of features and functions that are built into Office 365 that get you, most of the way there in a lot of cases, right? But it's these things on the edges that customers today, frankly, on their on-premises environment, for instance, are buying from third parties all over the place that they're probably not thinking of, right? So what I usually do when it comes to this kind of thing is, hey, I paint a picture that says, okay, here's how far we can take it with what comes out of the box, right? If you don't buy any upgraded features or functionality or any of those things, like this is how far you can go. And by the way, you'll probably meet your standard, but here are the places where you're risky. Example, Exchange Online Protection, which is what's the antivirus, the hygiene engine there. It is not identifying that malware in 22 seconds universally worldwide, right? It does trickle down there quickly, and certainly, in your own organization, we know that when you click on the malware, within the first person who clicks on it, it spreads within your own organization exponentially fast. Probably before, in certain cases, if it's a 0-day exploit, right? If you get it, you got it. Pretty broadly, really quickly, right? So there's an exposure, right? That's not an out-of-the-box capability, right? As we start to look at some of the things about managing specific applications and additional, so one of the examples on devices, right, is, so there's a lot, I can manage a device natively out of Office 365 and take some basic policies, right? But one of the biggest attack vectors is accidental data leakage in a mobile device, right? I think that the majority of workers are not trying to violate the trust of their, the society because they're, government employees, right? So, it's accidental stuff, which is, and I watched somebody do this not that long ago, which was they liked Evernote, right? Not a Microsoft product. So they were quickly taking what I would consider to be something that should be protected and copying it into Evernote, which may or may not have any security, environment behind it. It's a consumer-based service that's out there on the cloud, right? So, they don't even know what they're doing, but they were just copying and pasting stuff out of emails, et cetera, to give them action items into the tool that they loved and syncing it out into a consumer-grade cloud with no protection. Right? So while I can secure the device and apply these policies and generally meet my compliance needs natively in the product, I can't stop that from happening unless I take that next step, right? So, we talk about malware, we talk about that, and the list goes on and on. These are the things that people wish they could stop. And now, in a way, right, sort of bundled all together, most of those things all around the edges are resolved by doing this. So how I talk to them is just to paint that picture that way. Here's what you can do. You'll probably be okay, right? If any of these 10 things make you worry, you need to be looking at this other stuff, right? And oh, by the way, many customers started just like you did, and they end up going here, right? And I think you could probably add to how many customers started with, just a G3 kind of SKU and ramped up to what's now M35, 365.
What it gives you is peace of mind. So when you're thinking about, to use your earlier analogy, the data leaving the castle walls, once it's out of the walls, how do I have insight into where that data goes? How do I have insight into how it's being protected? And that's what the suite gives you. It gives you peace of mind.
And I think one of the other things that's sort of the unintended consequence of this is, in this getting back to the collaboration and why our customers are doing this at all to begin with, right? They're doing this to improve their productivity, right? They're looking for an ROI on this investment. If that list of 10 or 20 or 50 things that you don't get is what stops you from adopting your technology, right, and adopting this productivity suite, then you sort of defeated the purpose, right? So those 10%, conditional access. How do I do when people are out there not being able to secure things like Evernote, right? Not being able to manage a device fully, right? Those types of things, not being able to manage my authentication by roles, by application. Those types of things are the things that are going to potentially stop me from choosing to adopt something that the reason why I bought it in the first place, right? Well, thank you very much. This has been a great panel, guys. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I hope we provided a lot of value. I know I learned a lot, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.